You think attachment is love because no one ever taught you the difference. From the outside, attachment looks intense, passionate, even romantic. It feels deep, urgent, necessary. But love doesn't tighten its grip when you pull away. Attachment does. And that difference changes everything. Think about the moments when you felt the most in love. Were you calm or anxious? Were you expansive or afraid of losing something? Attachment disguises itself as love by borrowing its language, but its emotional signature is very different. Attachment says, I need you to feel okay. Love says, I choose you, even when I'm okay on my own. One is rooted in lack. The other in fullness. Most people don't realize they're attached because attachment feels familiar. It forms early, often before we have words for it. As children, love and survival are intertwined. Attention equals safety. Presence equals reassurance. So the nervous system learns a quiet rule: if I lose this connection, I lose myself. That rule doesn't disappear with age. It just matures into adult relationships, friendships, careers, even beliefs. That's why attachment feels so intense. It's not about the person in front of you, it's about the fear underneath. Fear of abandonment. Fear of emptiness. Fear of facing yourself without a mirror. And when fear is driving, we confuse intensity with depth. We confuse obsession with care. We confuse control with commitment. Consider a simple but uncomfortable example. Someone doesn't reply to your message for hours. Nothing has actually happened. No proof. No betrayal. Yet your body reacts. Tight chest. Racing thoughts. Stories forming. That reaction isn't love responding, it's attachment panicking. Love doesn't collapse in silence. Attachment does, because silence removes reassurance. Or think about how hard it is to let go of someone who clearly isn't right for you. You know the relationship drains you. You know you shrink inside it. Yet the idea of leaving feels unbearable. Not because you'll miss them, but because you'll have to sit with the emptiness they were covering. Attachment doesn't fear losing the person. It fears losing the distraction. This is where many people get stuck. They say, but I love them, when what they really mean is, I don't know who I am without them. Love doesn't erase identity. Attachment does. Love expands your world. Attachment narrows it until everything revolves around one source of emotional regulation. And here's the hardest truth: attachment often survives even when love is gone. That's why breakups hurt even when the relationship was unhealthy. You're not mourning connection, you're withdrawing from a dependency. Your nervous system is learning how to stand on its own again. If this is resonating so far, pause for a second and reflect honestly. Not judgmentally, honestly. And if you value content that goes beneath the surface instead of repeating cliches, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. It helps keep these conversations alive and reaching the people who need them most. Attachment also explains why jealousy feels so convincing. When you're attached, someone else's freedom feels like a threat. Their independence feels like rejection. Their happiness without you feels like betrayal. Love doesn't experience that. Love wants the other person to be whole, even if that wholeness doesn't depend on you. This doesn't mean attachment makes you weak or broken. It makes you human. But confusing attachment for love keeps you trapped in cycles of anxiety, control, and disappointment. Because no matter how much reassurance you get, it's never enough. Attachment is a hunger that can't be satisfied externally, and here's where things begin to shift. Once you see attachment clearly, it starts losing its power. Not immediately. Not effortlessly. But awareness loosens the knot. You begin to notice when you're reacting from fear instead of care. When you're holding on instead of connecting. When you're chasing certainty instead of presence. Love doesn't ask you to abandon yourself to keep it alive. Attachment does. Once you start seeing attachment clearly, you begin to notice how deeply it shapes your behavior, often without your consent. It shows up in the way you overthink messages, the way you replay conversations in your head, the way your mood depends on someone else's availability. Attachment turns relationships into emotional negotiations. You're not relating freely, you're managing anxiety. Point one of the clearest signs you're in attachment, not love, is how you relate to uncertainty. Love can tolerate not knowing. Attachment cannot. Attachment needs guarantees, labels, timelines, constant proof. It asks questions like, where do I stand? Are we okay? Do you still feel the same? Not because those questions are wrong, but because they're being asked from fear, not curiosity. Think about how often people say, I just want clarity. Most of the time, they're not asking for truth, they're asking for relief. They want the anxiety to stop. An attachment will accept almost any answer, even a painful one, as long as it ends the uncertainty. Love, on the other hand, can stay present without forcing outcomes. It understands that real connection unfolds, it can't be controlled. This is why attachment often pushes too hard, too fast. It rushes intimacy. It accelerates commitment. It confuses emotional exposure with emotional safety. You might open up deeply to someone very early, believing you're being vulnerable, when in reality you're trying to secure a bond before it has time to breathe. Love allows space. Attachment collapses it. Another example, notice how attachment reacts to boundaries. When someone asks for space, attachment hears rejection. When someone says no, attachment hears abandonment. Love hears information. Love can respect limits without interpreting them as threats. Attachment personalizes everything because its core belief is fragile. If you pull away, I disappear. This belief doesn't come from nowhere. It's often shaped by early experiences where connection felt inconsistent, where love had conditions, where attention had to be earned. So the adult mind says, I trust you, but the nervous system says, don't leave. And when those two are in conflict, the body usually wins. That's why attachment isn't solved by logic alone. You can understand all of this intellectually and still feel the pull. Healing attachment isn't about becoming cold or detached. It's about becoming secure. Secure people don't love less, they love without fear. Running the show. Here's a powerful reframe: love is not about being needed. It's about being free and choosing each other anyway. Attachment needs to be irreplaceable. Love doesn't. Love knows that even if you could leave, you're staying, and that choice is what makes it meaningful. Notice how attachment keeps score. Who texted last? Who cares more? Who's more invested? Love doesn't keep score because it isn't trying to protect itself from loss. Attachment is always bracing for impact. Love is present. If you're finding yourself in these patterns, this is a good moment to pause and breathe, not to judge yourself, but to recognize what's happening. And if this conversation is helping you see your relationships more clearly, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. It supports deeper content like this and helps it reach others who might be stuck in the same confusion. The shift from attachment to love doesn't happen by forcing independence or pretending you don't care. It happens by building a relationship with yourself that isn't dependent on external validation. When you can self-soothe, self-regulate, and sit with discomfort without immediately trying to escape it, attachment loosens naturally. And here's the paradox: when you stop needing someone to complete you, you actually become more capable of real love. You listen better. You choose more consciously. You stop confusing anxiety with chemistry. You stop chasing intensity and start valuing peace. Attachment is loud. Love is steady. Sit with that distinction for a moment. When attachment loosens, what emerges isn't distance, it's clarity. You don't become indifferent. You become grounded. And from that ground, love finally has space to exist without fear controlling it. This is where many people get confused. They think healing attachment means caring less, needing less, or becoming emotionally guarded. But that's not love, that's armor. Real love doesn't require walls. It requires stability. And stability comes from within, not from another person's consistency. When you're no longer attached, you stop scanning for signals. You stop reading between every line. You stop assigning meaning to pauses, tone shifts, or delayed replies. Not because you don't care, but because your sense of self is no longer hanging from someone else's behavior. You can feel desire without desperation. Connection without clinging. Think about how different it feels to want someone versus needing them. Wanting comes from abundance. Needing comes from lack. When you need someone, you unconsciously ask them to regulate your emotions, validate your worth, and soothe your fears. That's too much weight for any relationship to carry long term. Love collapses under that pressure. Resentment grows. Anxiety deepens. Love, in its healthiest form, is two complete people walking side by side, not holding each other up to avoid falling. This is why secure love feels quieter. Less dramatic. Less chaotic. There are fewer highs and lows, but more depth. More trust. More presence. Attachment feels like fireworks, intense, beautiful, and short-lived. Love feels like a steady fire that keeps you warm without burning you alive. You know you're moving out of attachment when you can sit with the possibility of loss without panic. Not because you don't value the relationship, but because you trust yourself to survive change. You know that if someone leaves, it will hurt, but it won't erase you. That knowledge changes how you love. You stop grasping. You start offering, and here's something rarely said out loud: attachment often keeps you loyal to potential instead of reality. You stay because of who someone could be, not who they consistently are. Love sees clearly. It doesn't abandon hope, but it doesn't sacrifice truth either. When love is present, you don't have to prove your value. You don't audition for attention. You don't shrink to be chosen. You show up as you are, and if it works, it works. If it doesn't, you grieve, but you don't chase. That's dignity. That's self-respect. That's love without attachment. If this shift in perspective is helping you rethink your relationships, with others and with yourself, take a moment now to support the channel. Subscribe and leave a like. It ensures content like this continues reaching people who are ready for deeper clarity, not surface-level advice. The goal isn't to eliminate attachment entirely. The goal is to stop letting it masquerade as love. When you can tell the difference, your relationships change. You choose differently. You stay less often out of fear and more often out of alignment. So the next time you feel that tightness, that urgency, that need to secure, to control, to hold on, pause. Ask yourself one honest question: is this love, or is this fear asking not to be left alone? The answer won't judge you. It will free you, because love doesn't ask you to disappear to keep it alive, and attachment, no matter how intense it feels, is not love.